pretty much start rolling out. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being on the meeting tonight. Hopefully we'll get more people showing up as time goes on. I know it's still a little early. What we're going to do right now is we're going to have everybody stand up for the flag salute, please. And Joseph's going to mute everybody.
Okay, and you'll have to unmute yourself when I do that, Kirk. All right. I pledge allegiance. Oh, let me put the flag up there. Flag,
put the flag
flag. There we go. Here we go. I pledge allegiance.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America.
And to the republic for which it stands. One nation. Under God. Indivisible. With liberty and justice for all.
Joseph, would you like to?
Yes, let's pause a moment and pray. Loving God, thank you that we can meet, though distant, we can be together. We ask that tonight you would help us learn things that will make us a better blessing to our communities. Lord, teach us how to keep us safe. Help Rachelle explain things to us so that we'll keep our shops safe from lawsuits, so that we can operate and be blessings to our communities. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I
guess you got to unmute yourself again, Kirk.
Joseph, would you like to give a brief, or Greg, we'll pass it on to you, give a real quick explanation of Zoom protocols?
Sure. So I'm sure we're all pretty versed in Zoom by now, but if you're not, we appreciate having the video on so we can develop a sense of community. And you will be muted for the so people can hear better the presentation. If you do have something to say, you're welcome to unmute yourself and join it in anytime. Please be aware of your surroundings and your background so that everything is appropriate for the meeting. Enjoy yourselves.
Thank you, Greg.
And when we introduce Rachelle, we'll find out how she wants to field questions, if she wants to receive them while she's speaking or wait till the end or put them in the chat. So we'll ask her that when her session starts.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, now we're going to go around and we're going to do self-introductions. When I say your name, you could give a brief thing of who you are. We're going to start off with Norm Blyden, who's our CPA for... How you doing, Norm?
Thanks for having me. Norm Blyden, I'm a CPA and business broker. We do monthly financials for businesses. We do payroll, and we help clients sell businesses. We handle anything from startups at the top end. Some of my clients are doing sales around 500 million, so they're doing very well. Thanks. Norm Blyden, CPA.
Thank you, Norm. Greg.
Thanks, Kurt. This is Greg Luck from Citrus College, and we train your students. So if you guys are in need of a student, please let me know. You can get a hold of me at glipp@citruscollege.edu, or just pretty much anybody know they'll figure out a way to hold of me. Our students are looking for jobs, and you're looking for techs, and that's why we're here.
Thank you, Greg. Next, we got Gene. How you doing, Gene?
Good evening, everyone. Gene Morrill, Certified Auto Specialist in Glendora. I am on the board of ASCCA5, your educational foundation. I'm also your government affairs member, along with several others on the call tonight. I've been a member since 1984. The benefits are endless, so if you're new, welcome. And talk to the old guys so you can figure out how the benefits work and how you can get smarter faster than us old guys did.
Thank you, Gene. Next, we have Glenn. How you doing, Glenn?
Unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself.
I'm not accustomed to being unmuted.
Okay, we'll move on then.
All right. Glenn Davis from GDA Enterprises in Upland, California, past state president, past chairman of ASC Education Foundation, and advisor to Chapter 5.
Thank you very much. Glenn's an honorary member at Chapter 5, also a newest board member. Thanks for coming on board. Randy, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Randy Lewis, world famous Jasper Engines and Transmissions. And right about now, we seem to be the only game in town because we can't keep up. It's insane.
All right, next we have John R.
John Rodriguez, Mitchell 1, newest member in our chapter.
John Rodriguez, Mitchell 1. Thanks for having me, guys. I finally got it figured out how to sign up, so that's super cool. Basically, I'm the Mitchell 1 rep from between the 60 and the 210. I would say from the 71 out to Glendale. So, yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me, guys. If you guys ever need anything, let me know.
Thank you very much. We have David Morris.
Good evening. I'm David Morris from Chapter 12. I saw your email today, so I thought I'd sit in and see what you guys are doing over there. But I hear you have a really good topic tonight, and I hope you don't mind me sitting in and participating, okay?
No problem.
Yeah.
Anytime. We appreciate other chapters coming on board. Thank you very much for coming. Daniel. I don't know if he could talk because, oh, there he goes.
Hello. Hi. I apologize to have my camera off. I'm driving back home here. Daniel from Marin County here. I'm chapter 21, San Francisco, and also I belong to the state membership committee. And I'm here to sit in and listen to you guys, learn some new things from you. Thank you for the invitation.
Great. Nice having you on board. Angel, are you able to talk? Okay, Angel still says connecting audio. I hope you could hear us, Angel. Craig.
Craig Johnson Automotive in Roland Heights. I'm also a board member of NASTAF, National Automotive Service Task Force. We solve information tooling gaps. If anybody here on the call shop has a problem with information tooling, NASTAF is here to help. There's other state board members that are NASTAF board members as well. Just get a hold of me privately. Joseph can give you my number. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. Bruce.
I'm here. Hey guys, Bruce Hawley Insurance Services. Glad to be back. Missed a few of these.
Bruce does insurance, workman's comp, and all our big help. Thank you, Bruce.
Yep.
Next, we have Mike Machado. Guess I should say which one. Okay, he's still muted.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I'm driving also. This is Mike Machado from A&E Automotive. This is my first meeting, so thanks for having me, and I look forward to learning a lot from you guys.
All right, I'm glad you made it, Mike.
Thanks.
What shop did you say you're from?
A&E.
A&E Automotive in Pasadena.
All right.
Well, good to see you, Ron. It's Randy.
Hey, Randy, it's Mike, actually. Good. Thanks, Randy.
Next, we have Mike B. He's driving. Can you talk, Mike?
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was driving. This is Mike from Lex Master Tech in Pasadena.
Well, get back to driving. We won't bug you anymore. Next, we have Johanna. How you doing, Johanna?
Hello, I'm good. This is from Beamer PhD in Pasadena.
Okay, nice to have you on board, Johanna.
Got a bunch more people signing in right now.
Well, good. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Next, we have Edwin. How you doing, Edwin? Okay,
Edwin from Certified, right down the street from you, Kirk.
yep. Next we have Ali. How you doing, Ali? Ali's muted, so he's not gonna talk to us. Ali, you're muted. Okay, Ali just unmuted himself. He lost him. Next we have Jim. How you doing, Jim?
Good. How are you?
Doing good.
Introductions got on.
Yeah, just doing introductions.
Okay, I'm Jim from Ward Service in Monrovia. Been on a long time. For a while, I thought I was getting voted off because you wouldn't let me on the thing. So
It wasn't telling me you were in the waiting room. I'm sorry. I look and then I see a whole bunch of people there.
it's all right. I'll never be late again.
Well, it's either we're doing introductions or you just volunteered for something you don't know about till next week.
Whatever.
Next we have Darren. How you doing, Darren?
Pretty good, guys. How you doing? I'm Darren from Gilbert Motor Service in Alhambra.
Nice to have you on board. And last we have Stefan, who's also muted.
There, is that better?
Yes,
Yeah.
now we can hear you.
You want to
Stefan,
say?
from what shop?
I'm retired automotive instructor.
Oh,
I
okay.
was just interested in seeing what's going on. I just,
What area are you from? Where you live?
I'm with Chapter 16, San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
Great, nice to have you on board. And last we have Rachelle Golden, who's going to be our speaker tonight.
Everyone, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to being here. So,
Well, thank you for being on board. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Now, Joseph had a question for you. I saw part of your last presentation. Are you going to be doing the same where you talk for a half hour and then you have questions, or how did you want to do it tonight?
we can do it that way. That seemed to be really that was a really great format. I don't want to bore you to tears with a long PowerPoint. So I will have my whole slide deck up just in case that there's questions that arise where there's a visual that goes along with it, but we can do 30 minutes and then Q&A. I think that would be great.
All right, I'll put you on as a co-host so you can share when you need to.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, great. Then we're going to be moving on. Craig, would you like to give a quick NASTAF report?
You know what? I'm going to give up my time. I want to hear what the guest speaker has tonight to say. Thank you.
Okay, Gene, would you like to give a government affairs?
Yes, and thank you very much. I'd like to start off with some good news. Norm just informed me that California voted last week to forgive the PPP money tax implications. So now your PPP money, you will not have to pay taxes federally or state. And that is why your accountant has held up your tax return waiting for this decision. So hoo-yah for us. That's some really good news. And I'm happy to report that. A lot is going on. The Bureau of Auto Repair had their meeting, bar advisory group meeting recently. And, you know, a lot always goes on. You're always welcome. You should get the link on an email if you want to sit in and listen to those. They talked about a lot of the different bills. Of course, the smog machines eventually are going to have, you know, cameras and different fraud prevention devices coming up. They're talking about enforcement. They talked about the cash in the can, which is the $10 deposit on 134 for the do-it-yourselfers. They're talking about citation and fine regulatory workshop that's coming up, where they want to talk. They're going to stay on 7 areas: false and misleading advertising, general standards, failure to produce records, failure to possess required auto body equipment, and payment or referral fee to a towing company, which is all good things. So all of this that I'm talking about, Joseph will email that to you tomorrow. I sent him all these reports. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, email me, whatever you want to do, that's fine. I'm also a member of Cal Chamber, and they put out, you know, their job killer list. So this is nice because it covers housing, taxes, water, many things other than auto. So I like to kind of take a look at this as well. And there's a lot of things coming down that they call this the 2021, let me see, job killer list. Again, Joseph will send it to you if you have any questions. Highlights are AB 995, AB 1003, which are two of the bills we are fighting in the automotive realm. So just, we're not the only ones who are fighting bills. Cal Chamber, the League of California Cities, a lot of folks are also against many of these bills. So if you have any questions, the Assembly Person Gonzalez from San Diego seems to be a thorn in our side. She wants to add to the number of sick days from 3 to 5. So hopefully we're opposed to that, of course. AB 1003 is actually kind of a interesting thing that if it passes and you make a mistake on a payroll check, that's considered fraud. You can actually go to jail for making a mistake on a payroll check. It's actually really, really bad. Jack Maladonoff is our lobbyist and our attorney friend. So he is fighting very, very hard for that. And there's also, like I said, when you get this, it has housing bills and tax bills, workplace safety, expansion of, you know, Cal OSHA. So look through it if you have any questions. Again, a lot of these bills haven't got any traction yet, but they are proposed. So they may be turned into a 2-year bill, they may go forward, or they may die. But these are all things that we need to be aware of. The other good news is AB 471, which originally started as the bill that Senator Lowe wanted to grade auto shops like restaurants with an A, B, C, D, or F. Jack Maladonoff, along with Dave Kusa, who knows Assemblyman Lowe, kind of got him to back burner that. And then they worked with the BAR to put together the Trusted Dealer Certification. If you haven't looked at that, go to the BAR website and look at it. It's very well done. And it's a referral service that you're going to be able to actually put up your shields if you're ASE certified, if you have these certifications. So it's kind of interesting because the tire shop right down the street has a big yellow mark saying this guy has citations, don't go to him, and he's busier than heck. So whether it means anything or not, who knows? But that's a good thing, is the Trusted Dealer Certification. Within the bill, it's a huge bill. Also, CAWA, the Auto Parts Association, has put in there a safety inspection for salvage cars. And we're calling this a camel's nose under the tent. So once we can get that approved, hopefully we can get a safety inspection approved and get the whole camel under the tent. All cars will need some kind of a safety inspection. Also, they're working on, if you do get litigation or a citation from BAR, they're putting together like a traffic school type of program to where you can do this training and then that citation will go off your record. And then the last thing with AB 471 is having a set of attorneys and judges, administrative officials that will hear our cases. So we're not just heard by, you know, BAR with no representation. They'll have a board with an independent auto repair person, and they'll have judges that are familiar with the auto repair realm. So all crazy, wacky stuff. Joseph will send those to you tomorrow. Look them over and let me know. So now on ASCEF, which is the educational foundation of our state organization. I was one of the scorers. We had 43 applicants from schools all over Southern California, or the state of California. What was decided was we were to take the top 15 and we awarded them $1,000 each from the state. Now, Chapter 5 has 2 of its own scholarships, 8 of the 15 students were from colleges within our area. So hoo-yah to our schools. That's like more than half of the state's scholarship applicants are from our chapter, which is outstanding. So we decided that our chapter scholarships are going to add another 500 to each of the 8. So those 8 folks will get 1,500 instead of 1,000. And kudos to Greg. They were from Citrus College and from Rio Hondo. So kudos to those folks for doing that. So we're hoping that we can get, you know, those students on a Zoom call or maybe an in-person meeting, if that happens, to recognize them for their achievements. So, and two other things I'd like to say, since Tim's not going to be on, or Johanna's on, I think, but next month we are fortunate enough to have Scott Brown, who is very good with ADOS, and he's going to do a program on the do's and don'ts, the what you needs, the basic presentation of ADOS and how we should approach it. So it'd be good for some of your technicians, foremen. So spread the word that it would be a really good meeting for owners, foremen, you know, your A-techs or even your C-techs to, you know, attend that meeting. And then last but not least is we made a pact to increase our membership by 30. So that means each one of you are supposed to bring in 1 member, and we haven't seen that happen. Thanks for coming in late, VJ. Missed my whole presentation. So he probably can't hear me. But anyway, so we all need to get on our horse, go to the next door neighbor, go to somebody and get a member to join. Or we need John to get 29 more members. Come on, John, get with it. So $125 a member, that's some pretty good cash for you to, you know, go after. So, but with that, I'll be quiet. And thank you, everybody. It's really awesome. I'm on a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of meetings, and it blows me away how well attended our meetings are compared to some of the other clubs and organizations out there. And Greg did do his first advisory meeting for Citrus College, and I think you had 22 people. So that was very, very good. So good job, Greg. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. One last thing is Citrus College is having their spring advisory on Wednesday, May 12th. I put it over in the chat link for anybody.
PCC.
Or I'm sorry, PCC is having their advisory, sorry. It's in the chat if anybody's interested, anybody around Pasadena, they trying to get more shops interested in going there. With that saying, Glenn, would you like to introduce?
Hey, Kirk, one last thing that I forgot. Joseph, I said Carm Capriato did a podcast on NASTEF that was very, very good. I listened to it this morning. So Joseph will send that out to you as well. So if you don't know what NASTEF is or what it does, then listen to that podcast. Donnie Cipher does a really nice job. Thank you.
And I put in the chat, in case some of you aren't watching it, if you are not a Chapter 5 member and you want to receive the emails that Gene's talking about, just type your name and your email address in the chat, and I'll make sure that you get it.
Okay, Glenn, would you like to introduce Rachel?
Sure, Kirk. Hi, guys. You all know me. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Glenn Davis from GDA Enterprises, starting my 40th year in the auto repair industry. About 7 years ago, we bought some restaurants, and my wife has been working on it since she was 17. About 4 years ago, my wife was working at the San Dimas location and working on dinner menus and employee issues and all this kind of stuff. And a person walked in with a very large manila folder and said, "Hi, are you the owner of American Fork Incorporated?" And she said, "Yes." And then they gave us this folder, and she brought it home. I opened it up, and it was a lawsuit by a gentleman who does this for a living. And evidently our website was not ADA compliant. been in business for 40 years, never heard of such a thing. So I started doing my homework, started talking to various people about ADA, looked up website lawsuits, found out this is a real thing, and it has pretty dramatic consequences for people who aren't prepared for it, and started trying to find counsel. And the same name kept coming up, Rachelle Golden. So I gave her a call. She immediately jumped into the fray. At the end, saved us a bunch of money. I tell you, when you get the folder, they've already got you pegged. And so you can do two things. You can either prepare and get rid of the risk, or you learn to adapt and deal with it. And if you have to deal with it, there's nobody else better to deal with ADA regulations and lawsuits and all of those kinds of things than Rachelle Golden. Rachelle, I give you the floor.
Well, thanks. That's it in a nutshell. We can all go home now. So thanks for coming. I'm teasing. No, that was really generous of you, Glenn. And it, as always, is just such a delight to see you and to work with you. And I'm just really happy to be here. And I really appreciate you inviting me to speak to your chapter. And based on the attendance, it looks like there's a need out there for this information. So I'm really looking forward to it. So I really quickly, I did want to touch base on AB 471 that was discussed a little bit earlier. I work with Cali BC as well. And so I've actually just sent off some additional verbiage that I think would be good to put into that bill. So they're going to circulate it in, to Lowe's office. We'll see if it makes it in time. But that is also part of what I do as well, not only litigation, but I work with elected officials all the time to create reform. So that way we can kind of swing the pendulum back into the business pocket, if you will. Plaintiffs, in my opinion, have gotten a little bit out of control. And a little bit is an understatement of the century. And so my goal is to work with elected officials and with you guys to make sure that you get to keep the dollars that you work very hard for in your pocket. So with that being said, I will go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. And let me... Okay, can you guys see my screen okay? Somebody gives me a thumbs up. Good. Okay, perfect. All right, so thanks, like I said, thanks for being here. I'm going to keep this to about 30 minutes and then we'll do Q&A at the end. And so last time I did this presentation for a different chapter, there were quite a few questions. And so I think it's more applicable to you guys and it's more helpful and informative if we get to engage in that dialogue. And I know there's quite a bit of you, but hopefully we can get some of those questions answered. So let's just dive right in. Obviously, I'm going to do the whole lawyer disclaimer. Just because I'm a lawyer doesn't mean I'm your lawyer yet. So this presentation is just for educational purposes. If you have been served with a lawsuit, or you think that one might be coming, or you have specific questions that relate to your particular business or your website, feel free to give me an email offline and I'll go ahead and answer those for you at no cost, of course, and just make sure that you get the information that you need, but this is not a confidential setting. So I would caution you up front if there are some specific things that you want to discuss to maybe do that offline in a more private setting. So as stated, and as Glenn stated so generously, I suffered a spinal cord injury actually when I was a teenager. And so I use a manual wheelchair myself. And so while originally these defense cases that I was taking on from construction-related access claims like Glenn has shared with you, they've now evolved over time into doing these I do these website litigation defense cases. So I do not represent any plaintiffs. I'm purely a defense lawyer. And so I do proactive consulting with people. So if you, at the end of this presentation, have some questions about your own website or need to kind of flesh some things out, I'd be happy to do that proactively with you. And then I also do defense litigation. And as I say, I do work with Cali BC, and I'm Johan Gallo. I'm sure some of you are familiar. He's chomping at the bit to get me to do some BAR investigation cases. So we'll see where that goes. I may be expanding my practice to some BAR cases. So it could be a new niche for me. So we'll see how that goes. But I just wanted to briefly cover some numbers, and I won't go into this in a ton of detail. But as you all know, the population is getting older, right? We're living longer. Modern medicine is a wonder, and so people are living longer. And so it's estimated by 2030 that there'll be 63 million people who are 65 and older, which is about 20% of the population. So accessibility not only is important to make sure that your business doesn't get sued, but it's also really important to protect your bottom line, because as people are living longer, they're going to be around to need your services more and more. And so it really is kind of the mind shift is it's part of the cost of doing business. Now, being sued is not necessarily should be the part of cost of doing business, but thinking proactively about how you can tailor your websites and your physical locations, which we won't talk about today, but if you've got specific questions, we can chat about that later. But specifically as it relates to your website, if you're excluding an entire population of people, then your bottom line is affected. And so I get the question a lot, especially from auto repair and car dealerships and things like that, is people with low vision or with blindness don't drive. Well, that's true, but they may be securing services for somebody else, for another family member, spouse, child, parent, what have you. And so just because they may not actually be driving the car doesn't necessarily mean that they're not actually using your website on behalf of somebody else or need to use that website on behalf of somebody else. So I just want to kind of clarify that up front, because that is it's a great question. If you're blind, how can you drive? But there are those services out there that people do for others. So so we'll just keep that in mind as we go through it. But people with disabilities also had, according to the last census, about $175 billion in discretionary income, and that was in 2003. So that number is only going to increase with this next census if it ever gets agreed upon and ever gets published. But that number is just going to continue to grow. So it's a huge chunk of money out there. And so if your website is not compliant, then you're excluding quite a bit of money for people who do have the income and the funds to either upgrade cars, get cars restored, do the repairs that they need to do, all those sorts of things. So there is a dollar value attached to accessibility as well. So, what is the Americans with Disabilities Act? I think we all can kind of understand globally that, you can't discriminate somebody based on their disability, which absolutely is appropriate, right? I would not be able to function in this world myself with a disability without the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so I, as a person with a disability, am entitled to go into your place of business and access those goods and services just as anybody else without a disability is able to do that. What's interesting about these website cases is internet is a new phenomenon. Websites are a relatively new phenomenon. I certainly in my lifetime remember, seeing the www in a magazine. I was like, what the heck is that? As a kid, and I was like, what is that? Why would you want one of those? I think it was in an Architectural Digest magazine. Well, now I know why you would want one of those. And we all have them. We all use them. It's a necessary part of our business. So since it's a new phenomenon and the ADA was enacted in 1990, there's that disconnect of, well, how are we going to legislate something that didn't exist when it was enacted? Well, fortunately for people with, communication disorders, effective communication has always been contemplated by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it was found in the Code of Federal Regulations from the very beginning. So historically, that meant, closed captionings for your videos, like movie theaters, television, things like that, sign language interpreters, those types of things, TTY phones, you may have heard of. But now as technology is changing and the internet is becoming more and more robust, and it's becoming an essential part of all of our lives, the laws and the courts are now catching up and saying, well, the ADA has always contemplated effective communication. Now that technology changes, we need to make sure that the law changes and catches up, and so we can continue to provide that access. So that's really why we're here, is because the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that effective communication. Sometimes plaintiffs will file in federal court when it comes to the website claims, but most often that's really reserved for the construction related access claims, like, you know, your ramp is too steep, your door pressure is too heavy, those types of things. However, I have seen some of the website cases be brought in federal court, but there's a difference between federal law and state law now, because we had a recent decision come out in 2019 that we'll go through it in brief in a little bit later. But most of these cases, most of the website cases are coming in through state court. And that's really important, because if you were to, let's say, fix the website, they're still entitled to that $4,000 visit to the website. So if somebody's sitting in their living room and goes to your website 4 times over the period of 2 weeks, well, that's $4,000 per pop. If they were in federal court, let's say they did that, okay, fine. But if you fixed your website, then the claim would become moot and they would no longer have a claim in federal court. Well, they don't want to do that. So they're filing it in state court. So you'll see at the end of this, the cost of burying your head in the sand isn't worth it. It's because $4,000 per visit to the website, plus you're going to always pay their attorney's fees and costs, plus you're going to have to hire your own attorney and pay your attorney's fees and costs, plus you still have to remediate the website. So it's much more cost effective, even though it can be expensive, but it is much more cost effective to be proactive and to get in front of this than it is to just sit back and say, okay, I'm just going to wait and pray that I don't get hit. It's really not worth the risk, because you're going to be paying quadruple what you would be if you were to just remediate the website after this presentation. So what does website accessibility really even mean? I'm throwing around this term about effective communication, and it's, you know, if somebody's blind, how do they read a website, right? Well, so effective communication applies to several different types of disabilities. One is a mobility disability. Let's say that somebody has cerebral palsy or gotten some sort of accident like myself and doesn't have the use of their hands. So they don't have the ability to use their mouse. Maybe they control their computer with a joystick that they use with their tongue. Maybe they type with their feet. Those types of mobility disabilities sometimes require different software that integrates with the website in order for it to be used. Maybe somebody has a hearing disability and you've got a lot of videos, or if you're doing maybe video inspections on some cars, if you don't want people in your back bays where your shop is, and you're doing it on video and you're trying to, communicate with someone in that regard, what if they can't hear? How are you providing that communication to them? It can be cognitive. Somebody that has a seizure disorder or is autistic or has a very hard time processing information quickly. What if the screen where you fill out your information, let's say to make an appointment, times out in 5 minutes? Well, if that person can't understand and perceive in 5 minutes even to type in their name, then they're prohibited from making that appointment, but somebody without that disability wouldn't be prohibited. Speech impediments too, if there are communication disorders with maybe they need a TTY machine, or they're using some sort of assistive technology where they're speaking into some sort of program that will then, type into their computer. All of those things, all of that technology that they purchase must be compatible with your website in order for it to work. So if somebody's using a screen reading software, it reads the screen out loud to them so they can say, so they can understand. They can read the title. So what does website accessibility even mean? And then it will go to the next paragraph. Website litigation arises when a person with a communication, It will read it out loud to them so they can understand and perceive what's on the website itself. And so that's providing that effective communication. So while they have the technology, your obligation is to make sure that it's coded correctly so that the technology is compatible with that website. Because if it's not compatible, their technology doesn't work and it's not effective for them. And so it can be very frustrating for them when using a website. So, what does the coding look like? So there's a organization called the World Wide Web Consortium, and it is truly an international organization with people from all over the world who get together and make up guidelines. It's not a government entity, okay? So, and this is not codified in any statute. They just come together from all walks of life, developers, business community people, people with disabilities who test out the technology and test out the regulation. And they develop these guidelines, which have been basically universally accepted all over the world. And the United States is finally catching up. Most of Europe is already coding websites to automatically comply with the website content accessibility guidelines. So it's that WCAG acronym you see at the top of the screen. And it's level 2.0 AA. You don't care about the level. You don't need to know the differences between 2.0 AA and 2.1. Your web developer should know the difference. But basically what they say is if your coding meets this level of code, then you're providing the most reasonable, accessible website that we can come up with. That it will accommodate the vast majority of people. Yes, there's always going to be those people who need more or who need something different based on maybe they've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different types of disabilities, and they, you know, the WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 isn't robust enough for them. So those one-off, you know, kind of those one-off unique situations do arise. But if you comply with that 2.0 and that 2.1, or the 2.1 rather, then you are providing access to the most general population that the WC3 believes is accurate. So it's a universally accepted standard by over 1 billion people worldwide. So again, it's already being implemented all over the world. We're just taking our time catching up. And there's been a lot of movement in the legislature, you know, both on the local level here in California, but also on the federal level. The House of Representatives in the previous administration has twice sent letters to the Trump administration saying, hey, the Department of Justice isn't giving us any guidance on making this WCAG 2.0 AA, you know, part of a statute. So will you please force them to say, you need to come up with some sort of guideline, because courts are now left with, we have no guideline. There is nothing in a statute. The WCAG is not anywhere in the Code of Federal Regulations or the United States Code. And so we're left with people, courts rather, coming up with their own rule saying, okay, in some jurisdictions, yes, you do need to comply with 2.0 AA in order to be accessible. And in other jurisdictions, websites aren't even a place of public accommodation and therefore not covered by the ADA at all. And so there's this split happening. And so the the House of Representatives has put pressure on the previous administration to kind of, you know, to say, hey, DOJ, come up with something. The DOJ did respond and said, thank you for your letters. We appreciate you. We've always endorsed effective communication. That's always been our mantra. We've always endorsed 2.0 AA as the standard, but go ahead and you get to be creative and come up with how you want to comply with how you want to provide effective communication for people. That's up to the business. We're not gonna codify it. And so they punted it twice, and it's really frustrating for businesses and litigators like myself, because it's like, for the love, please just come up with a standard that we can all comply with. Now in the new administration, I would guarantee that letter is not even going to get sent, because it's not even gonna get a response, most likely, especially with the changes to the United States Access Board that's happening, with the disability advocacy community becoming even stronger and even more backed by the federal government in this administration. I think until we're in a different situation, that it's probably going to stay, the Department of Justice is not going to do anything about it, which is unfortunate. And so, you know, it really is up to the business to determine how they're going to provide accessibility if strict compliance with 2.0 AA and 2.1 is not readily achievable for them, which is good, because it gives you, you know, more wiggle room, but it's also more frustrating because now you're in litigation, right? Because you're basically saying, this is what I did because this is all I could do. And this is how I was providing access, and you, court, please bless it with a motion in my favor, granting a judgment in my favor, and it's up to the courts to decide. So the gray area can be problematic. So what does being coded correctly mean? You know, what does it do for the person on the user side, on the interface side? It makes the website perceivable. So it makes it so that it's coded so all users can perceive and understand the content of the website. So those videos do have captionings. The images have alternative text. And what that means is that when you post a picture on your website or a logo or something like that, and there's not text embedded into that image, when their screen reader reads the screen, it will just say image. It doesn't describe what's in the image. So I'm looking at Joe's background right now, and he's using that beautiful ASCCA logo. So if that were posted on a website, it would need to say ASCCA logo, and then it would have to have the, you know, Automotive Service Council of California. It would have to describe what that logo is. So when the screen reader gets to it, it'll say logo, ASCCA, and then it'll have that information. So it's embedded with that alternative text, so the person who's reviewing the website can perceive what's on the screen. People with heightened sensory awareness issues, you know, if a page is super cluttered or if they're flashing images. So let's say that person does have heightened sensory awareness issues. Maybe it triggers a seizure for them. Those flashing pages, or, you know, the scrolling, you know, the auto scrolls on pages can scroll pretty fast. Well, that, you know, clutter of content rather, and colors on the screen can be really triggering. So if it's coded correctly, it won't trigger those type of sensory issues for the vast majority of people that suffer from those types of disabilities. It's operable so that all users can interact with the website or application. So again, maybe you don't use a mouse and you need to use the entire website from a joystick or from a keyboard. Well, can you navigate through your website and fill out the contact us and make an appointment and, you know, pay your bill online? Can you do all that from your keyboard? Well, if you can't, then that person can't use the website in a way that's usable to them or operable to them. If it's coded correctly, it will be able to do that for them. It's understandable. So it's, again, that screen reader like I talked about. And what's really important about it being understandable is that the pages are consistent. So each page has a heading, which is tagged heading, so the person knows which page they're landing on, and it will read from top to bottom, left to right. If it's not coded correctly, sometimes the screen reading software will jump around. So it will jump from maybe the order in, let's say in this presentation, I can code this to be, or arrange it to be consistent. But if I didn't pay attention to that, it may read a header or a blank text box in the background, or it may read a logo and it would be out of order. So the page itself, as we're looking at it, makes sense because we're looking at it as a whole, but they're hearing it by element. And so if it's not consistent from page to page to page, then it gets very confusing and doesn't make sense. And so that's really important. And then again, it's robust, so it's compatible with all those different technologies that we had talked about. So that's what being coded WCAG 2.0 AA and 2.1 will do. And the difference between 2.0 and 2.1, again, you don't need to get into the weeds about this, but if you rely heavily on a mobile desktop application, or you have like an actual app, a mobile app for something, then if you're going to remediate your website, 2.1 is the way to go, because that is more, it's actually been out in the world for several years now, and just that 2.0 is finally catching up in the court system, but we all know litigation takes forever, and so it's actually kind of an outdated set of code because it's not super compatible with mobile applications. So if this is something that you're interested in doing at the end of this presentation and you go to your website developer, which there's a list of questions at the end that I'll share with you that you should ask your web developer, 2.1 is really the way to go for that, because it is more compatible with website applications. So let's see here. So we already talked about examples. I won't bore you more with that. This is just a common list of barriers that are within a complaint. So again, it's that alternate text to graphics, Functions can be performed without a keyboard, missing headings so they don't know which page they're landing on. I'm more than happy to send this presentation to Joe afterwards. So if you want to read this, you know, individually at your own time, that's totally fine. I'm happy to share it with you all. But again, I won't bore you with kind of the details of that. You get the picture. What I see a lot of times is people will buy these widgets and pay for this subscription and slap on a widget to their website. And by widget, I mean, it's a company that will say, you know, we provide accessibility. All you need to do is download our plugin and it'll attach to your website and you'll be compatible. That is snake oil, in my opinion. And the reason why is because now I'm seeing more and more the widgets are now being a part of those lawsuits because it's making the website even more difficult to use for the person with screen reading technology. So this paragraph is from an actual lawsuit that was just filed in March. And so basically, you know, while there's a whole bunch of pay options like PayPal, American Express, checkout, all sorts of things, there's a pop-up window for them to log in to, you know, as a guest or as a member. Well, that widget doesn't perceive that there's a pop-up window. So the widget doesn't, so the person's like, cool, I'm at the pay portal, but I can't access the actual operation of paying because the pop-up is not being detected by this widget. It doesn't alert the screen reader to that pop-up window. So it's a big problem. This is from that same lawsuit. And so links and buttons on the website don't describe their purpose. So it'll, you know, the screen reading software will say link to what? To PayPal, to contact us, to see, you know, here's pictures of your vehicle when it was being serviced. Where does the link go? Is it to Facebook? Is it to Instagram? What does it do? The widget can't be intuitive. It'll just say link. So it's not helpful. It's not useful at all. A lot of people use those kind of chat bots on their websites now as well, which is great, but a widget can't recognize and interact with that website chat icon. It can't engage in that conversation. And the icon itself is not labeled with any descriptive alternative text. So it might just say pop-up box. Well, pop-up box for what? What am I trying to be, you know, where am I being led here? And so those widgets do not provide accessibility. They just don't. And so while sometimes it's useful and helpful to have a widget subscription for short term while you're planning and budgeting for an actual remediation of your website. Maybe you need to create a new website. Maybe you need to just recode your website. Maybe you need to take down some pages that aren't driving traffic anyway. And it'll be more simply to, you know, if you take those pages down and then you recode it, it'll save you some cost. While you're figuring all that out, a widget can be really helpful, but please do not fall into the trap that it should be your end all be all, because they don't work. And they make it very frustrating for users. So just be aware of that. And so I talked a little bit earlier about the federal court and state court, and I'm just going to touch briefly on that. In federal court, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal in the Robles versus Domino's case held that in order for a website to be a place of public accommodation, which means that it's a privately owned business that's open to the public, okay, there has to be a nexus to a brick and mortar. So there has to be some sort of commerce exchanged on that website, which would lead to that nexus to the brick and mortar for it to be considered covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's really great news on the federal level, because if you're, you know, purely a virtual business, which you guys are not, I understand that. But let's say that you have a side business and it's all virtual. That would be good news, that you don't have to have a brick and mortar. And if you don't, then your website is not considered a place of public accommodation and falls outside of the Americans with Disabilities Act. However, in California state courts, there is no nexus requirement to a brick and mortar. So if you are truly a virtual business, then you do not have to have a brick and mortar for it to be considered a place of public accommodation. So that's why we're seeing a lot of cases, instead of being filed in federal court, like those construction claims, they're filed in state court because that nexus requirement is not there. And then just last month, Gill versus Winn-Dixie is a case that's been up and down and up and down in the 11th Circuit. They held that no, a website is not a place of public accommodation. So now you've got the 9th Circuit that says it is, and you've got the 11th Circuit that says it isn't. So what does that tell me? Now we're seeing a split in these jurisdictions, and I won't be surprised if it goes up to the United States Supreme Court for their final ruling. And if it does, they're going to say it's a place of public accommodation because they're going to look at the history of the Department of Justice's endorsement and what they've always considered to be the requirement for effective communication. So if I were a betting person, I would say that it's going to be, if it goes up to the United States Supreme Court, that websites will be deemed on the federal level as well. So just a heads up for that. So how do you know if you have a compliant website? Well, rule of thumb, if this is the first time that you've ever heard this presentation, I'm going to put money on the fact that your website is not ADA compliant. And when I say ADA compliant, I mean compliant with those WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 guidelines. You can certainly do an audit, and there's 2 types of audits to determine if your website is accessible or not. The first and the most common that a lot of people use is an automated audit. And again, it's like a widget. So it goes on and it reads it's an electronic scanning process in it, and it does a risk assessment for you. It tells you, gives you a report telling you what your issues are, which is all fine and dandy. However, again, it's not intuitive, it's not interactive, and so it misses a lot, and automated results can be very inconsistent. So it can literally read the same website 3 times in a row and produce 3 different results. So that's hard when you send that to your web developer and say, here, fix this, and I'm like, fix what? We've got 3 different reports we're dealing with, 3 different issues. We don't know what's what, so it can be challenging there, but it's a good place to start if you want to do an audit. But then there's companies that do live manual audits where they actually have people who use assistive technology who will go onto your website and scan it and use it and interact with it and will tell you what the issues are. There are a lot of coders out there that work for these companies that have visual impairments. In fact, one of them that I work with regularly, the founder and CEO is wholly blind. And he's a brilliant coder. In fact, there's another organization that's just an audit company and a development company. They've just hired on, right out of college, a young woman who has very low vision. And so she uses assistive technology all the time. And so that's kind of brilliant because not only are you getting that risk assessment and that remediation report, you're getting consistent results and somebody's actually using their technology on your website. Plus, they can help you create an accessibility statement. And so an accessibility statement this is Chipotle's, you can Google it. I won't bore you with the details, but basically it says, hey, thanks for coming to our website. We're working on it. We're committed to making sure that you have the most pleasant experience possible while we're budgeting for WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 website, or we've already remediated to that, whatever phase in the process you are. You state that, and then basically if you have any issues using our website, please let us know and we'll do whatever we can to help you. And a live user audit company will then put their own information so that person can contact the company that actually did the coding for the website right out of the gate. There is a price difference. So it is a lot more expensive, obviously, to use the live user audit. And you don't necessarily need an audit because, like I said, if you have never heard of this before, and if you're managing your own website, or after you talk to your vendor and they're like, or your web developer, and you ask them whether they know anything about the WCAG guidelines, and they say, I've never heard of it, well, then you don't need an audit. You know that you're not in compliance. So don't waste your money on that. Just spend the money on actual remediation. So here's that list, and this will be the last slide that I talk about, so we can do some question and answers. And so here's that list for your web developers. Are they using a template? If they are, have they been able to tweak the template so that its foundation is embedded in WCAG guidelines? If not, that's a problem. What standard does the company use to determine accessibility? Are they just saying, yeah, we're, kind of vaguely familiar. We do alternative text and we know we have high contrast font and things like that. Okay, great. But what standard are you holding yourself to? And if they don't know, that's a problem, because it should be either the 2.0 AA or the 2.1 guidelines. And they're online, they can go look them up. It's not hard to find information about it. What's the testing process that they use to certify accessibility? Do they use those automated tests? Do they use a live user audit? How do they do that? When there are upgrades to the site, will that affect accessibility? When you update the site, have you been trained on how to update it in a way that won't take it out of compliance? Have they given you a one sheet of, okay, when you're changing out pictures or deals or coupons or contact information or hours or whatever, whenever you're messing with the website, are they showing you, or your web development team, if you use an outside company, how to ensure that it stays in an accessible format? So does their team train your team? Do they train you if you're maintaining your own website? Do they monitor? So do they do, maybe monthly or quarterly checks to make sure that the content is still in compliance? Do they provide support for customers who are having problems? Does that company provide any sort of indemnification if there was a lawsuit to be filed? And how familiar are they with the 2.1 standards? So all of those questions are really important questions to ask your web developer. And if they don't know the answer to any of them, or they only know the answer to a few of them, I would suggest maybe getting a second opinion. So, the recap really is, don't panic. Come up with a plan. And so budgeting is really important, making sure you can document that you're doing what you can with the resources that you have when you can, to make your website compliant, whether that is pulling down pages that you don't use and having a smaller website that needs to be recoded. Maybe it's scrapping the whole thing and building a new one. And maybe it's creating certain elements. Maybe you go to Facebook instead of having it on your own website and hosting all the information on your own website. Now you feed people to Facebook because Facebook is compliant, right? So come up with a plan for that. Get a live user audit done if you can. Get the right team of people in place if you can. Again, I do the proactive consulting and defense litigation. If you get a demand letter, do not ignore it, please. Please do not throw it in the trash. It may not lead to litigation, but if you make the other side mad, then that's going to probably increase the likelihood that a lawsuit would be filed if you get a demand letter. So don't ignore those letters when you get them. Contact your IT department. We learned the hard way that GoDaddy does not offer any sort of accessible templates, and they are you use our website, you use it at your own risk company. So you may want to look at those terms and conditions of the template that you're using, because if something were to happen and you're like, wait a minute, I'm just putting, this is not my thing. I didn't create this. I can't even touch the website template. It's completely locked. I'm prohibited from that. What do the terms and conditions say? Is there an avenue that you can take in order to provide recourse for you and your business against maybe the person who's hosting your website? And develop a budget and document. Whenever you make a change, whenever you make a phone call, whenever you get there's a gnat in here that's driving me crazy. Whenever you make a phone call to figure out what pricing options are, what your strategies are, take quick notes, jot them down, put them in a file. So that way, if a lawsuit does happen, you can hand me your folder and say, I did what you said and I documented everything. And I'm like, yes, this is a case that I can work with. So, so make sure that you document everything. So with that, I will open it up to questions. I do see that Glenn has his hand raised, and I know that there's some questions in the chat feature. Joe, I don't know if you want to handle those or if you want me to dive right in. I'll defer to your preference.
Well, the first question I saw was in the chat, and it says, if the website is owned and operated or maintained by an outside entity, who's liable? The shop or the company that runs the website? You just partially addressed it, I think.
Yeah, it depends on what your contract says. So I would bet that they're gonna say that you indemnify them. You may need to renegotiate that contract. If there's an arbitration provision in the contract, you need to be aware of that as well. Arbitration does not speed things up. especially in Southern California. The arbitration forum is so backlogged, it takes longer than court and is very expensive. So you may want to look at, those contracts. If it comes up for renew and you want an extra set of eyes to look at it, send it my way. I'll look at it for you, and make sure that you're adequately protected, or that you have some sort of recourse, and you can work together with your web developer and on equal footing. So.
The next was a comment. Vijay said he thinks it only applies to businesses with 15 or more full-time employees. Is there a threshold of business size that this applies to?
That is so there's 5 titles under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title I is the title that deals with employment, and that is true for employees. And so for accommodating employees with disabilities, there's that threshold of 15 or more. But with places of public accommodation, that's under Title III, and it has nothing to do with your employee count. So the minute you open your doors to the public, you are responsible for complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Okay, and now Glenn, you're muted.
You're still muted.
Can't hear you, Glenn. You're not muted, but we can't hear you.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah. Johanna.
So I was just curious I wanted to double check. Were you saying that if GoDaddy hosts your website, that they don't even allow you the capability of being compliant?
That's right.
So I basically have to change my host.
That's right.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
John, unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
So my question is, I guess twofold. Are people just going on websites suing people daily? What's the severity of this? And on a lighter note, if you will, why are you doing what you do? You obviously have a disability. Why aren't you just suing websites daily? You could make $1 million a day doing this.
Well, I'll answer the tough question first about why I do what I do. I do what I do because I grew up with a business owner parents, and I understand that you work damn hard for your livelihood. And so I would be so disappointed in myself if I use my disability for financial extortion for businesses, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
Because
it really was a joke on that side. Yeah.
Well, right. No, and I know it was, but I get that question a lot, especially if I'm doing like a presentation in person. People see me roll in and they're like, uh-oh, we're going to hear the wrong side of the coin here, because they just assume that I work with plaintiffs. But no, I obviously care about accessibility, and when there's somebody who's been truly wronged, that's an entirely different situation. And I have taken plaintiffs' cases where somebody was told you cannot come here because you're in a wheelchair. That unfortunately still happens. So I'll take those cases all day long. But when it comes to these types of cases, hell no. There's no way that I would do that. And yes, to answer your first question, this is what the plaintiffs, this is their job. So they're in a relationship with their lawyers. They have some sort of agreement that, for every case that you file, you get a certain amount, we'll keep the rest. And they'll file case after case after case after case, multiple cases a day against multiple businesses, without ever having the intent to actually patron the business or the website. So unfortunately, it's just a money-making machine. It's easy money for the lawyers, and it's easy money for the plaintiffs.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Glenn, have you gotten your speaker working yet? Your microphone? I don't see you. I don't hear you. Probably not. All right, Craig.
Thank you. My website host, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. My website host, I was concerned about this about 6 months ago, and she said that I'm totally compliant. and that because I do have some videos on my website, and she said they're linked to YouTube. And so because they're linked to YouTube, they're compliant. Would you comment on that, please?
She's correct.
Testing.
She's correct. So if you link out to one of those sites, if you're on, I don't know about like, Vine or Vimeo or anything like that, but YouTube is compliant, Facebook is compliant. I know that Instagram historically has not been. And so there may be a problem there. I don't know if they've changed their platform at all. I would imagine that they have by this point, but I don't know for sure. But yes, if you link out to YouTube, then you're fine.
Okay, and just a follow-up question. She further stated that on the bottom and the top of my website, there's an ADA button that says, like a question. And then when you click on it, it says, do you have a question? And then it has their number to call them to, if you have a problem accessing the website, to call this.
That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. My only question would be, are they sure that that button itself is compliant? So can the person perceive that that button is there? Will the screen reader pick it up? And can this person who's using the screen reader interact with that feature? If it's just an add-on that they've added to the surface of the page itself and haven't coded that particular feature themselves, there may be a problem there. So that may be something you want to circle back to them with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, Glenn.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I had more of a comment than a question. When we started going through this stuff, I did an amazing amount of research on ADA compliance and all these kinds of things. And these guys are vicious. I mean, this is low-hanging fruit. I started looking at website checkers, and I plugged in probably at least 100 ASCCA shops, and none of them passed. What I found out later, that some of these website checkers that are out on the internet are actually tied into these guys that are doing these lawsuits. So when you plug your website into this checker, it automatically goes to these guys, and they got an automatic fail on your website. I mean, they're pretty smart about this stuff.
Yeah, I would say that if you are interested in developing, new website or checking your own or what have you, really work with someone that you trust. If you're gonna do this on your own, just be careful, because there are those pitfalls there. So I do work with several companies who do this this is what they do, and I'm not affiliated with them. I don't get a kickback from them or anything like that. I just know and trust them. So if you would like, kind of my go-to recommendations, I'd be happy to email those to you. So just shoot me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat. I know I stopped sharing my screen. I thought it'd be easier for you guys to connect. But I'll put my email in the chat box, and then just shoot me an email and I'll send them to you. No problem.
Hey, Rachelle, another question. Vijay said his understanding of Title III is that public accommodation is for banks, public transportation, and hotels. His question is auto repair a part of that?
You betcha. You betcha. So any building really that offers a service and that affects commerce is going to be considered a place of public accommodation. There's a list of 12 in the actual code itself, but there's catch-all provisions that, if you affect commerce and you are open to the public, you have an obligation to provide your goods and services in an accessible way, and that's just your job as a business owner.
Have any other questions? Norm, I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead. Unmute yourself. Can't hear you.
Lawsuits. How deep should I go checking to see that what he tells me is correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? It was a little hard to hear.
My website developer says that I pay a monthly insurance premium to safeguard me against costs for this type of lawsuit. I am at a couple.
I'm going to rephrase that back to you to see if I understood the question because the sound is a little bit spotty. So is the question that your web developer is charging you a monthly fee to ensure that you're compliant? Is that it?
It's an insurance policy that covers me against lawsuits.
Got it. I'm sorry. Well, so it depends on what type of policy you have. So for construction related access claims, if you have an employment practices liability insurance policy, then arguably it could be picked up. If there's, if you've got cyber insurance in some way, there certainly could be a provision in your insurance that would cover it. But typically, insurance coverages do not pick up intentional acts. They're typically specifically excluded. And if you violate the UNRU Act, which is the same as the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it's on the California level, which if they're brought in state court, that's what they're alleging is that you violated the UNRU Act and not the ADA, but they're the same. They have the same protections. It's an intentional act. And so it's an intentional violation of that person's civil rights. So there could be a disagreement about what that definition it includes. So you'd want to look at your policy pretty carefully to see what the exclusions are. But it is possible that it may pick it up.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I hope I didn't scare everyone.
Might be too late for that.
I know, right? Really, the bottom line is that you just need to be aware of it. And if you come up with a plan and you just, like I said, document, and you start reaching out to people, vendors, website developers, and things like that, and ask them some of those questions. Just arm yourself with that information and then figure out what it would cost. So right now, the last slide of my presentation had my website address there. It is under construction because I'm building it to be obvious. Tupin on my back, I could just see that being just lovely for plaintiffs to sue me for having an inaccessible website. So it's under construction. I will say to build mine from scratch, it's going to be pretty robust, is about $9,000. So it is not cheap, but you can phase it as well. So you can do like staging sites, so where you can build a couple pages at a time. And then as finances allow, you can add to that. You can filter out, like I said, information to different platforms, YouTube, Facebook, things like that. So there are ways to provide access that won't cost you $10,000. And so again, if you need referrals, I'd be happy to share my trusted colleagues. No problem.
Rachelle, I don't know if you have a couple of minutes. Could you tell all these shop owners about CASP inspections? We've been talking about websites all night, but a CASP inspection will identify the access problems you have with your shop and help you save some serious money out of litigation if somebody comes in and busts you for your lobby or your parking lot or your bathrooms or whatever.
Yep. So a CASP inspector is a certified access specialist, and they sit for an exam that's offered by the Division of State Architect, which is a government entity here in California. And basically they memorize and learn how to use the accessibility design codes. So, and they've got to be licensed architects, engineers, interior designers, general contractors. They have to have a design background. So they're already familiar with the code itself, but then they sit for this rigorous exam, and then they're they're certified by the state of California to go out and actually perform an audit of your physical building. So it will tell you, they will tell you in the report whether your parking stalls meet the applicable standards, whether they're 18 feet long, and if they're, no more than 2% slope in any direction, if your path of travel is on the shortest reasonable route to the front entrance, if your, door pressure is too heavy, if your signage is not correct. And so they'll point out all of those potential barriers and give you a report and saying, okay, here's what your issues are. Now you need to develop a plan and go fix it. And just like these drive-by, or I should say surf-by, website lawsuits, there are people that drive by literally or use Google Earth because they're lazy and don't want to drive, and will just file lawsuits all day long against the business. And so auto repair shops are hit hard. I've represented several, especially in the Southern California area. There's a couple of law firms that seem to really like picking on auto repair shops for whatever reason. And it's costly. It's $4,000 per visit. So it's not per item. So, somebody drives by and says there's 6 things wrong with your parking lot. It's not $4,000 per each violation. It's $4,000 per visit. But again, it's their attorney's fees and costs, and you have to hire your own, and then you've got to fix the property. So there's a lot of value in knowing what your risk is, and there's a lot of power in developing a budget and creating a plan on your own time and with your own budget in mind. Because the minute a lawsuit is filed, your timeline goes out the window. So if you were going to remediate your place for, let's say over 2 years because of finances or what have you, well, a plaintiff is going to make you do it in 6 months in a settlement agreement, or a year if you're lucky. So that timeline just got reduced in half, and it's expensive. It's very expensive. So I do proactive consulting and defense litigation with that as well. And if you need CAS referrals in your area, I have a whole host that I work with in LA often. So I'd be happy to share those with you as well.
So these people that file these lawsuits don't have to show that there was harm?
No. The only thing they have to show, and this is what plaintiffs don't like when I push back, is they say, well, here's the violation. I'm going to come back and I'm going to throw in everything in the kitchen sink and say, okay, now I'm going to amend my complaint and say that all of these were potential barriers, even though I didn't encounter them. I was deterred from coming back because I saw that the parking lot was bad, but I want to make sure that there's no other violations. So I want to inspect your property, and then I'm going to add those to the complaint. Well, the caveat to that is that it has to relate to that person's particular disability. So for me, let's say wheelchair user, I can't sue for the lack of Braille signage. I'm not blind and I don't read Braille. Okay, so it doesn't relate to my disability. And what plaintiffs' lawyers they don't like the fact that it has to relate to their particular disability. So if let's say somebody actually does try to go and they see parking lot violations, and they just allege that there's a ramp in the access aisle. That's all that they allege. And then they come back and say, oh, well, the parking stall was 3%. It's like, well, you went there, you used the property, but you didn't allege that the first time. So it must not have related to your disability. So you don't have standing to bring that allegation. And so there is ways to defend against it. But unfortunately, it's cheaper to settle. And by cheaper, I mean, $10,000 versus litigating to a motion for summary judgment or something like that. And it can be 20 to 30 very easily. But no, they don't have to show damage. It just has to relate to their particular disability.
So these people that do the Google searches and stuff, then they have to actually have a disability.
They do. Yes.
Okay, so it can't be just like I'm an able-bodied person. I can't just go do a search and say, okay, that's not accessible or it doesn't meet this requirement.
No. What will happen though, and how this always plays out is, so the scheme, if you will, as I understand it, based on what I've been able to determine over the years, is the lawyers will have these plaintiffs on their payroll and will send them out. And they're called testers. So they'll go out, they'll use Google Earth, and they'll look at your properties from Google Earth. And then what they'll do is they'll send that information to a person who may be a CASP inspector. Arguably, it's not arguably, it is very unethical, and people can lose their certification for doing an undercover CASP inspection, but people do it all the time because it's catch me if you can, basically. So then they will have their inspector go out and confirm what the person actually experienced. And then that way they'll throw that in their complaint. And so it's very frustrating because the plaintiff most often was never even on site. They just saw issues from Google Earth, and then their inspector said, yes, it's out of compliance technically, and then they'll file a complaint.
Unfortunately, that just seems so wrong, but
It is incredibly wrong. And that's why I work for the defense, because it just gives people with disabilities, in my opinion, a bad name. It just furthers that discriminatory animus. It just makes business owners skeptical of people like myself, who I've noticed a shift in personality from business owners over the years since these cases have been more prevalent. My family's noticed it as well. People are very scared when I come in their business. They think I'm going to sue them. I did not have that experience for many, many, many years of being in a wheelchair. And now I'm experiencing it all the time. And it's really, really frustrating.
All right, John, I see your hand is up. We'll make this the last question because we're approaching 8 o'clock. Rachelle, are you able to stay online for a little bit after we finish if people want to hang around? Okay.
Yeah. And I see a question in the chat too, so I'll answer that after this one. So.
Okay. John, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I was wondering, you mentioned something before about somebody having to have a disability in order to file a claim or a case against somebody, but what about the individual filing a case that's like within their area where they would live or be accessible to? And what I mean is, can somebody in Sacramento file a case against someone in San Diego when they have no intentions of being down there or anything?
The answer to that is yes, they can certainly file a lawsuit. And then it's up to your defense lawyer to say that there's no actual particularized or concrete injury, which is, and by injury, I mean, they had to have had a reason to be there. They had to have had, been actually in that area at that time. It's not like they can't say, oh, well, I live in Sacramento. I was going to San Diego, but I decided not to go to San Diego because I couldn't access this one shop and I was afraid I was going to have car trouble and blah, blah, blah. That's a hypothetical injury. And so they don't have standing, but you have to litigate that. You have to file a motion to get out of that kind of lawsuit. And I do that all the time because there's one in the hotel industry. There's a particular individual who files in California, but she lives in Arizona. Well, you can't file a lawsuit in California under the Unruh Act if you didn't encounter the barrier in California. And so those cases get dismissed all the time. But so there's certainly ways to defend against claims like that, but you got to spend the money to hire a lawyer to do that. So it's better to take that money that you would be spending on your own legal counsel and putting it in your business and doing the CAS report and getting those corrections made, just like the website. Spend that money in your defense early and don't give it away to plaintiffs and their lawyers and your defense counsel.
See, one of my, obviously you've heard this before, but one of my big problems is I've actually hired a mechanic who was in a wheelchair and he was a really good mechanic.
Good for you.
But he moved on to do his own business, but that's fine. But I've never had somebody come down my driveway, get out of their car, get in their wheelchair and roll inside the shop and say, I'd like you to take care of my car. Not saying that we wouldn't, because we obviously would, but I've never had that. And so I'm kind of wondering, and I know that I understand what you said, where the rules don't apply if you provide a business to the public, that you have to provide all of these coverages. But is there such a thing as, hey, I'm not going after a certain clientele, so I shouldn't have to abide by all of those rules?
No. So, and the reason why I say that is from a user standpoint. I drive a regular car, and and I don't know if you have a specialty shop or what have you, but I drive a regular car. I just have hand controls in my Cadillac, and I would go to any repair shop that would work on it. And so because of that, because I have the ability to decide where I want to go, you have an obligation to provide those services in an accessible way, which means having an accessible place for me to go to.
John,
okay. Yes.
John, I have an example. I have a customer that's been with me probably 25 years.
Yep.
About 10 years ago, 12 years ago, she came down with MS. and it was minor at the time, and now it's pretty severe. But she drives a handicap accessible van, and my building is quite old, and we had to go through quite a bit of figuring out on how to get her into our lobby and make her comfortable, and be able to service her van. I didn't want to lose her as a customer. She's been a great customer and has recommended many members. You never know what happens to your customers over a period of time. And so keeping them accessible just makes sense.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
No, and I see your point. You know, it's like, well, we've never had the request. So what if somebody needs it, we'll provide it. Well, it's not a wait and see duty. It's a proactive duty that you have to provide access so that when someone needs it, you're ready to go.
See, but like what Glenn was saying, he has an older facility and so do we. And, you know, many of our facilities, like our building is 90 some years old. So, you know, none of these rules applied 90 years ago.
Right.
And,
but John, that's the beauty of the CASP inspection. If you start making a proactive effort at reducing some of these access problems, the courts go a long way in giving you lenience on a lot of things. If you do nothing, then, you know, ignorance is prosecutable. But if you know what your problems are, and even if they're small, but you do them step by step and you record them and you make notes of them, the courts oftentimes look the other way on that stuff.
He's absolutely right. And
go ahead, Rachelle.
Just really quickly, because I get that question a lot about grandfathering in, right? Like people think that they're grandfathered into the ADA. First of all, grandfathering doesn't exist. It's not a thing. So that's a myth. So yes, there are a ton of old buildings, and Glenn's absolutely right. It's doing the cheap and easy things first. So let's say that you've got a lobby that doesn't provide enough clearance. Maybe you've got stairs. Maybe there's some just various issues on site. We'll do the cheap and easy things first. Fix your signage, restripe your parking lot if you need to, so you can show the court, all right, I got this report, now I'm working on it while I'm budgeting for maybe we're moving to a different place, or maybe we're adding on, or maybe we're remodeling, or what have you. If you can show that you're doing your readily achievable barrier removal in an old building, you are complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act, because that's the standard for compliance, that you're doing what you can when you can based on your budget. If you don't do anything and you're in an old building, you're not doing your readily achievable barrier removal, and therefore you are not complying with the ADA. So while technical compliance to the new design standards isn't required, you still have a duty to show the court that you're doing what you can when you can with your budget.
okay, so that's good to know that moving forward does help.
Good.
Yeah, this kind of ties into that question in the chat. It says, I believe you have a certain amount of time to fix a violation before the fine kicks in, and is that correct?
That is incorrect. That is incorrect. We have been working very hard on the state law level to do a notice and opportunity to cure bill. There's been several elected officials over the years that have drafted a notice and opportunity to cure. So basically, if somebody goes on your site, they see something's incorrect, they have to provide you notice of that, and they give you, 60, 30, 90 days, whatever it is. And then, for you to fix it. If you fix it, you're all good. If you don't fix it, then you get that penalty. They have not been successful on any level. Because unfortunately here in our state, the legislature thinks that you shouldn't have to wait for civil rights. And while I agree with that, I also understand that providing an accessible parking stall to the letter of the code is not intuitive, and therefore there should be some grace. But clearly that is not what our state believes as a whole. So there is no time frame. If you were out of compliance today, somebody can literally go on Google Earth tonight and you could have a lawsuit tomorrow and you would be liable.
And the trial lawyers contribute to Sacramento a lot more than we do.
That's right.
Okay, let's put a comma here. Kirk, we'll turn it back over to you, and then if people want to hang around a little bit, we can come back to Rachelle in a few minutes.
Okay. I guess what everybody's waiting for now is Joseph's gonna draw some numbers, and the numbers, if you are drawn and you're on the call, then you will win some money.
And let me ask too, if you have the capability to turn your camera on, please do so, because I like to try and get at least, you know, a good shot where everybody's smiling face is visible, because I like to put a photo in the newsletter of our Zoom screen here. So I appreciate that if you can get your picture up there while we do this. All right, let's draw some numbers here.
We have to smile too.
Only if you want to. All right, let's see. First number, 13. Bill's Quality Auto Care is not with us tonight. And this is, if your number's drawn, you get a choice of $100 dues credit or $50 check sent to you. All right, number 1, 60-minute tune, not here tonight. Number 39, oh, what a shame. Joe's Garage. Javier was going to be here, but he had a family situation come up, wasn't able to make it. And 46, Lima Auto Repair, not here. So we said we will keep drawing until we have a winner. All right, 26, Ed's Automotive. This is going to get embarrassing now. People aren't here. All Car Specialists. Sorry, Paul.
You won last time.
He doesn't need the money.
Performance Automotive, another Javier, he's not here.
Oh, Jasper.
G&M, not here.
Oh.
Rick's Automotive. This is a good way to find out how many numbers we have. Drive, not here. Moe's Auto Service Center.
Well, I'm going to sign off, guys. Thanks for the info.
All right,
Thanks,
Stephen,
Steve.
thank you for joining us.
Take care.
Thank you.
Tireman,
Oh, time second time last week too. Last time.
Johnny's Auto Service. They're not
What
here
are you doing?
tonight.
What are you doing?
High Point Distributing, not here.
Oh,
I should send out a list in the next newsletter of all the shops that were drawn and weren't here.
Yeah.
I think, but I'm
That
too
would
nice.
be a really good idea.
Oh, now this is a sad one. Angels, you know what? Angel tried to log on and wasn't able
He
to get
was
his
here.
sound. Yeah, he wasn't able to get his sound worked out. So Angels, I'm going to let him know that he was the winner and let him decide how he wants to do this. So,
Agreed.
all right, Angels.
He gets 50%.
No, he was the first one in the waiting room, and then when I opened it up, all we saw was he was trying to connect to the audio and wasn't able to do it. So he's the winner tonight. All right.
Yeah.
Kirk, back to you. Anything you want to end with, and then we'll go back to discussion if people have more questions for Rachelle.
I just want to thank everybody for taking the time and being on the call, and especially thank you, Rachel, for doing this. We
Hey, those of us
appreciate
that are
you
left,
taking
let's
your time to try to help us out.
demonstrate our gratitude to her.
And that's all for me.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
All right, Rachelle, yes, thank you so much for being here. Anyone else have any questions? Ali?
No, I don't.
Yes,
Yeah.
Ali, I see your
I
hand.
just want to ask. Yeah, sure. I just want to
I'm
ask.
still here.
is Kukui one of those website designer? Is saved on her list?
Is who?
Kukui.
Kukui.
Okay, so I first became familiar with Kukui at the last ASCCA meeting that I did a presentation for. So I have not yet had the opportunity to connect with them individually, but I am aware. I know that they were there taking good notes and things like that. So that would be something that you would want to reach out to them and see if they are accessible.
Yeah, I believe because I have some animation standard for them to put it in my website. They came back to tell me this is against ADLS. So I believe they are, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, ask them the questions. And like I said, the presentation is available to you. So if you want the kind of the list that I had, feel free to use that. But just pick their brain and see if, based on the information now that you have, now that you're educated, if it seems like they're compatible. And I'm sure that they are, because I'm sure if they're not, I'm sure they're working towards it, because I know that they were a part of the last presentation that I did. So I was happy to see them there.
I suggest anybody building a website needs to read their website agreement with the company and make sure that that language is specifically applied to your website, that they accept all of that liability.
Or have some sort of alternative, mediation process, that you can engage in or something like that. But yes, there should be some sort of sharing of the liability. I agree.
And Rachelle,
I kind of wonder if even having a website is worth it anymore.
There's that also, with all the other free things that are available. Sometimes like I have a client in kind of Eastern LA that has just a one pager, and then everything else is on Facebook. And that's the way they decided to handle it. And it was perfectly fine. They can do it that way.
So
John?
Everything is directly to Facebook. They only have just one link out there.
Yeah. So it's directed to their page. That's where they put their updates. That's where they do their advertising. Because they know that it's going to be compliant, and it's not their responsibility at that point. So they just have fed kind of their interactive modules to Facebook and kept just the contact. Here's our contact information, our hours, our location on their page.
Now that plain and simple page you're talking about, does if it's text only or text in one picture, does that have to be checked for?
Nope, because you have to be able to interact. It has to affect commerce. And so if it's a stagnant website and there's nothing to interact with it, then arguably somebody could still sue you and you'd still have to fight for it. But I would bet that they would go to somebody else, because there's no module for them to interact with it. So there's no contact us or anything.
Isn't the link to Facebook, wouldn't the link to Facebook be considered interaction?
It could be, but that technically, arguably, wouldn't really affect commerce, because you're not creating commerce through that link. You're directing them to a website where then the commerce would be engaged. And so, it would be a stretch for a plaintiff to really go there. I would expect that if you just had a one page where that link was to Facebook, that they would go somewhere else. That's a lot more where the website would be more robust.
John, since we got sued, I have 3 businesses, an auto repair shop and 2 restaurants with over 70 employees. I haven't had a website in 4 years. I haven't found that I needed it through Google My Business, through Facebook, through Yelp, your local chamber of commerce. We've had no problems getting our message out without a website.
Well, that's why I brought it up, because I don't remember if it was you or who brought it up some time ago that they were dropping their websites and just going without.
So that was probably me, because I chronicled all this stuff a couple of years ago on Team Talk. So
right, yeah, and now that you mention it, I remembered that you had been pretty vocal about that. But thank you.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. With Yelp and things like that. Yeah, I mean, you can advertise and do whatever you need to do through those portals, through those websites. So why would you really need to create your own? You know, there may not be a need.
Daniel, your hand is up.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the lawyer to get us questions answered. I appreciate her time and all of you guys' time. Question is, when you are sending videos with your invoicing, the digital multimeter that we have to the customers, would that also follow the same type of regulations?
Yeah. So you would want to check and see. So when you send those invoices, how are those videos appearing? Are they appearing like via like a Google or a YouTube link, or is it embedded in the invoice itself? All of those questions we'd need to flesh that out. But if you're showing that interactive media on an invoice, then yes, it would need to be compliant and be up to code for sure.
So, okay, so our invoice. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thanks for coming.
Rachelle, I was going to say, if you could send me your PowerPoint presentation, then I'll have it here so that if anyone wants it, they can ask for it and I'll send it to them.
Okay, I will do that.
And I will post this video. I'll edit out the front of the meeting. You know, I'll start where we actually started, but I'll post it on our website as well, video of the Zoom call.
Great. If you could send me the link to that so I can feed it into my website, that would be awesome.
Sure, absolutely.
So.
All right.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
All right. Yes, I want to thank everybody as well for being here, and especially thank you, Rachelle. Look forward to any future interaction we have as well. I have a feeling that you're going to be a real blessing to ASCCA.
Well, I'm at your service, so I care about what you guys do. It's really important to me and our community. So whatever I can do to help, you know where to find me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Have a great evening, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, Rachelle. Take
Bye.
care. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Glenn.
Good night, Joseph. Good night, Glenn.
Good night, Johanna.
All right. See you guys later.
All right.
Well, good night then.
Hey, Rocky, you were real quiet tonight.
Oh, what, did you guys hear me?
No, I hear you now.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, because I was on the other line talking to somebody else for a while. So it went good. Was everything good?
Yeah, I thought it was really well. We had about, I think, 28 people. So I'm glad of that. At the beginning of the meeting, they only knew of 13 that were going to be here. So, but that's kind of typical of our meetings. You know, just the chapter responds to the Evite, and then we have a lot from other chapters, which again we did tonight. So that was good.
Yeah, what was yeah, you guys, I didn't have that many people show up in my meeting when I did with her.
Well, you're not as good looking as me.
Yeah, well, that's true. I don't know why I'm laughing. That's true. But you know, that's not good telling you much because I'm uglier than everybody else, so it doesn't make any difference. But
well, thank you for being here,
welcome.
Bruce, are you still there, or are you stepped away from the computer and don't know we've ended? Yeah. All right, I'm going to go ahead and shut it off now. Glenn, thank you for your contribution.
Nice evening.
Take it easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, for your contribution as well tonight. All right.